Oh, we're not on. Oh, you caught me with my pants down again. Here we go. Tighten my fundoshi. Get ready. Here we go. God, this would be terrible if this is broadcast. The audience actually heard this.
Oh, here we go. Good morning. This was a different layout. And okay, welcome to Japanese Politics One-on-One. This is episode 257 with Timothy Langley, the CEO of Langley Esquire, the oldest standing government relations firm here in Tokyo, and me as a host, Maya Matsuoka. So I'm very pleased to say good morning to Timothy, who is with us this time from in Katsuyama, I believe. Timothy?
That's right. That's
Yes.
right. I'm sitting inside the protected cabin of the good ship Grimm's. It is howling wind. It rained last night. It was a really rockety evening and a hellacious day of sailing yesterday. But I'm here today to report on what's going on in Japanese politics that's important to everybody that's in the program.
Yes, and we have successfully gone through the first week of this new year, 2026, and there has been a lot going on in Japanese politics, even though, as you wrote in your post on LinkedIn, Timothy, we cannot see many of those events on the surface, right? But there are a lot of undercurrents there,
Yeah.
and the government is preparing for a rather turbulent year, I believe. And of course, the geopolitics here in this region are picking up, if I can say this. And I believe that there is a lot to watch out for if you are doing business in Japan or if you're living here, not only in Japan, but of course in this region. So Japanese Politics One-on-One is your to-go briefing because we're here every Sunday morning at 8:20. Timothy delivers the news and the undercurrents, of course, in Japanese politics, and hopefully helps you learn what is important for you if you do business in Japan once again, or you live here. And today, I wanted to say, before we go into the details, of course, I wanted to say, please let us know that you have been here by hitting like, subscribe, or follow, depending on which platform you're watching us on. And of course, don't forget to leave your comments and questions because we will address them in the Q&A session after the briefing is over. And Timothy, it's over to you now.
Okay, Maya, you might also want to tell everybody about movie night. There are some
Yeah.
people that will tune in, and as soon as I start talking, then they sign off. So in the first part of the program, you might want to tell people if you want to, connect physically and personally. Maya has organized a movie night, and it's in 2 weeks, right?
Yes, it's on the 20th of January. That is a
On a
Tuesday
Tuesday.
evening. Yes, on a Tuesday. And we're going to announce more details about the movie and the place, the venue, actually a little bit later. But please stay with us. And if you're in Tokyo, and if your schedule allows, we will be very happy to see you there. So, yes, please put that
Okay.
on your calendar.
Thank you. So now everybody will be signing off. But listen, everybody, thank you very much for tuning in. This is episode 258, is it, Maya?
59.
250. Oh my
Oh,
gosh.
7. 7.
It's 257. So
Yes.
every week we're reporting to you Japan hands, budding Japan hands, people who are following policy, working in embassies, that sort of thing. So you can follow us on YouTube or on LinkedIn. And yeah, please just hit the like button if you like what we're doing. It's the kind of the psychic energy that we feed off of, because otherwise we're not selling soap here. So this is the only revenue that we generate. This is today is January 11th, and as Maya said, it's the first business week of the year, and talking about what's going on, how politics is moving. It has been incredibly busy, even though it's been rather quiet. We started the first week, and then we roll into a 3-day weekend, which is somewhat strange. But today I'm going to talk about what's going on with the Prime Minister. Did she have any foreign dignitaries, any delegations that visited? And that answer is no. She has been, nose to the grind wheel on coalescing the power that she has, the position she has. There was an announcement. There was a a story that came out on Friday, just 2 days ago, that she's considering a snap election. So this is, I don't know if this is being attributed to her or not, but it's one of these trial balloons that some unidentified person has kind of signaled that they will be moving towards a potential snap election. This, I don't know, is very feasible. I'd like to get into that a little bit more. But there's also stuff going on on the defense areas, in geopolitics, Venezuela, and the price of oil. The price of oil is very important to Japan, although the Venezuela situation doesn't touch Japan in an oil-based sense, but it touches Japan very dramatically in a geopolitical sense. And I'd like to talk a little bit about that. Tomorrow is a coming of age day. I want to talk a tiny bit about what coming of age day is and what it means in the general context. It is somewhat important. It's one of the 16 national holidays of the year. And once again, it was moved physically so that it could be a 3-day weekend to kind of jigger up the economy just a tiny bit, rather than having a holiday in the middle of the week. And so I'd like to get to those issues in more depth and more detail. Let me turn it back over to you, Maya, and then I will talk for about 30 minutes, and then we can roll into the best part of the briefing, which is the Q&A, where you can feed your questions to Maya, your comments, concerns, your complaints about the presenter, that sort of thing. So back to you, Maya.
Yes, thank you, Timothy. And again, we also issue a synopsis of these briefings, which goes out a couple of days after the briefing is over. During the week, if you haven't subscribed yet, we encourage you to do that. If you wonder where you can do that, we are on Substack there. And of course, if you want me to add you to the email, the mailing list, I'll be happy to do that. Let me know. You can message me on LinkedIn. And also, I wanted to announce one more thing, because I also have a podcast which is about doing business in Japan and living here in Japan on Wednesday morning. And 1 month from today, exactly month from today, we're going to have a very special guest there. We've got Glenn S. Fukushima as our guest speaker there. And well, many of you already know him as somebody who has been very important and very a big contributor to the Japan-US relations, because he lived and worked in Japan, and he's currently based both in Japan and the United States. He is a senior fellow at the Stanford University, but his history in business here in Japan is really a long one, and there is so much to learn from him. So please put this one on your calendar. That's February 11th. That's Wednesday, 8 o'clock in the morning. So please remember to watch the podcast then. And Timothy, thank you very much for letting me plug this as well. So now it's over to you, and we're going into the main briefing. Thanks a lot.
Great. Thank you very much. And about Glenn Fukushima, everybody knows or should know him. He is a personal friend. I've known him for about 30 years. Very influential in Japanese politics. Potentially the ambassador had things run differently, the ambassador of the United States to Japan. So he is still a very important political figure. Kudos to you, Maya, for getting him on your show. So that's great. And I encourage people to listen.
I have to thank for this, Izawa Sensei.
Kay.
Yes, Kay.
Okay.
Yes.
Thanks, Kay.
Yes. Thank you very much indeed. Yes.
Let me get into the briefing then. So first off, we almost always, Maya, talk about what's going on with the Prime Minister. Japan is a hierarchical society, and in politics in particular, everything starts at the top. And if it's not the emperor that's at the top when we talk about these things, then it's the Prime Minister. And then there are other important figures in the hierarchy. But when you're talking about Japanese politics, it kind of all starts with the LDP, the leader of the LDP, what's going on with what used to be the factions, what's the power base. And we talk about this, many people complain, and I was in the same boat before I got really involved in Japanese politics, that politics is just about, remaining in power and staying in power, and the LDP being able to throw its weight around. And we've been in the doldrums. Japan's been in the doldrums for 20, 25 years. And this fight just continues. And I think, in support of what we're experiencing and why we talk so much about Japanese politics is because without some sort of firm control over policy and implementation, everything is a dogfight and nothing seems to move, and everybody's critical of who's supposed to be in power. That's the position that we are in right now. We have a unique opportunity with the current prime minister, the first female to guide Japanese politics, and she's trying really hard. I mean, there was Kishida, there was Mr. Ishiba, before that there was Suga. Things really were not moving very cohesively, especially with Mr. Ishiba. And Ms. Takaichi is trying hard to avoid that scenario and to cobble together a coalition. And it's been amazing what's been going on since the last time we talked. So we talk every week on a Sunday, and we try and bring you up to speed on what's happened. On Wednesday, Ms. Takaichi, inside the Kante, inside the Prime Minister's residence, had dinner with Mr. Suga and Mr. Baba. This is really interesting. Mr. Suga used to be Prime Minister, and Mr. Baba used to be the leader of Ishin. So Mr. Suga as Prime Minister and leader of the LDP, and dinner with Mr. Baba, who used to be the leader of Ishin. You might remember he was moved aside on the same kind of pace as the three individuals who were kicked out of Ishin. There was a little bit of a coup d'etat going on. These three individuals were asked to leave Ishin. They became independent members, and then they just joined the LDP about a month ago. And now with this dinner with Mr. Baba, you've got to imagine what kind of conversation. And it went long. It wasn't just a meet and greet. It was a sit-down dinner that lasted more than an hour, and inside the Prime Minister's residence. She actually, by the way, has moved into the residence. Her husband was a member of the parliament. He's been infirm, and she is his primary carekeeper. So even though she's prime minister, before she became prime minister, she was well known as being, somebody who's taking care of her husband. And this appeals to people because there are a lot of people in that same situation. Grandma and grandpa are, having a bad time. They're getting towards the end of their life, and the caretakers, the Japan just doesn't have the number to take care of that. So the burden falls on the family members. So she's representative of a large segment of Japanese society. And just the fact that she is taking care of her husband while she's doing her job, and the fact that she's a woman who has risen up in the social hierarchy, it really is an appealing story for people. So her popularity is high. It's at around 70% right now. They've done recent polls focused more importantly on the defense forces, and I'm going to talk about that a little bit more. But the point here is that the prime minister, she didn't have any foreign visitors, no foreign dignitaries this last week, the first work week of the year. She's been mostly just fixing the structure of where we're going as a country. And they established that the diet would open on the 23rd, which is a Friday. So for those of you who don't know, opening the diet, it's not really a work day. The prime minister opens the diet. Actually, the emperor travels across the moat. He comes up in a motorcade. He uses the staircase that was built specifically and exclusively for the emperor. He rides up the stairs, or walks up the stairs, or maybe the elevator, and opens the diet. That's what he's supposed to do constitutionally. The diet is supposed to start in a January date and run for 150 days, and that starts on the 23rd. We're 11 days away from that. So she has been very hard trying to cobble together this loose alliance that she has. It's not like what the LDP had with Komeito. 26 years, Komeito and the LDP were in bed together. That meant that there was a formal coalition, which means that Komeito had a cabinet seat. They had a member of the cabinet who came from Komeito over 26 years to kind of solidify that. It's not that kind of an alliance. Ishin is helping to bolster the LDP by bringing its members to vote on issues of importance to the LDP. But they're holding back a little bit. They didn't join completely the government. They are kind of an alliance. And if the issue benefits us or we support it, then we'll vote for you. And in exchange for that, you're going to do certain things for us. You're going to promise to reduce the number of diet seats by 10%. You promise that. And you're also going to make Osaka a capital city, or the second capital city, should anything happen. So when you make that pronouncement, you've got to put, beef to the bones. And that means making certain structural changes so that Osaka can accommodate a transition from Osaka or from Tokyo to Osaka. So that actually went nowhere. These two promises, there were 10 promises that the LDP, Ms. Takaichi, made to Ishin to have them make this coalition. It's not everything that they wanted, and it's not juicy enough for them to join the government, but it is enough for them to have enough seats to push through certain things. As it stands right now, the LDP and Ishin have just 50%, not 50% plus one. They only have 50% of the diet seats. So they can move policies through. They were successful in moving the supplementary budget, for example, maybe 15 days ago. But Komeito joined in on that too. So there are dynamics at play right now. Ishin wants to be considered more important to the LDP. Unfortunately, even with this alliance of Ishin and the LDP, it's not the full Monty. They still don't have a majority in the lower house, and in the upper house, they're short maybe 20 votes. So in order to pass certain bills, most of the bills require passage in the upper house and in the lower house to become law, except for the budget. The budget requires the lower house to pass to the upper house. The upper house has 30 days to consider it, and then they pass it down to the lower house. And if they have issues with it, if they don't like it, if they want to change it, the voting of the lower house carries. That's with the budget. So this story that came out on Friday, somebody in the Prime Minister's office wants to hold or is thinking of a snap election in February. This is really somewhat strange. Logistically, it would work. The story is, and by the way, if they were going to have a snap election, you would have thought they would have held it early in January. They would have opened the diet on maybe the 7th or 8th or 9th and called for a snap election immediately, and then had the rest of January potentially to begin deliberations for the budget. So this news story, and they didn't, they moved it to the 23rd. So this news story, something must have happened, you've got to understand. Something must have happened that now there's somebody considering having a snap election in February. This means that the diet would open, they would have deliberations, and then in February, they would have a snap election. It takes the lower house must pass the budget, give it to the upper house, then there's 30 days they can wait. In that period of time, yes, they could hold an election without causing too much disruption. But I think it's going to be disruptive. It's a lot of energy for little payback. What the LDP wants to do is bolster its position in the lower house. It still doesn't address the upper house issue. So I think this conversation about a snap election, I think it's maybe more of a threat to Ishin and to the Democratic Party for the People, maybe even Komeito, that they should coalesce more in order to be able to push policy through, particularly the budget, and then move on into the spring with the strength. So the Japanese population is curious about what's going on in politics, as we all are. We want to know, is Japan stable? Is it consistent? Is it promoting the interests of the people? Is it working on the economy? Can we come back to the roaring 80s and the bubble economy and Japan purchasing, real estate all over the world? Is it going to have that? And the dynamics and the structure of Japanese business society and the culture itself kind of tells us no. So the Prime Minister is trying to cobble together these very desperate sources of political power into some sort of a fabric so it can move policy through the lower house and the upper house. The lower house is not that difficult. The upper house is a real challenge. And so this is where she has been spending a lot of time. The budget deadline is April 1st. The Diet must pass the budget by April 1st. So lower house needs to handle it, pass to the upper house. That's all that's going to happen moving forward. The Diet will open in 11 days. And I think before that, this movement that the Prime Minister and her cabinet are making is to form this more tight coalition. If you're Ishin, you don't like the fact that Mr. Tamaki and the Democratic Party for the People are cozying up to the LDP. You'll notice that that happened towards the end of the year before the Diet closed. After the Diet it was before the extraordinary Diet session ended. They passed the supplemental budget, and then Mr. Tamaki was successful in gaining a concession from the Prime Minister to raise the ceiling of non-tax salary above a certain threshold, impacting millions of Japanese people who are kind of teetering at that level where they're making ends meet. A lot of students, people who have just joined a company, they're not quite, making a lot of headway in the salary range. Single mothers, that sort of thing. So, for a certain amount of the income that you receive as a income is taxed, and that ceiling was raised. So it really provides a lot of boost and maybe hopefully appreciation of voters for the LDP and for Mr. Tamaki. So Mr. Tamaki's star has risen, while Ishin is saying, "Hey, I was here first. I was your buddy, and those three guys that we kicked out, they joined the LDP. So we had 50% plus one. And then, unfortunately, one of your Diet members died. So now we're still back at 50%. And you're kind of courting our arch enemy, the Democratic Party for the People, and that loudmouth Mr. Tamaki. So there's no love between Ishin and the Democratic Party for the People. But the Democratic Party for the People is getting a lot of leeway with the LDP. If the LDP accepts Tamaki and the Democratic Party for the People in this kind of loose coalition, they've solved the lower house issue, but they've also solved the upper house issue. That means this kind of three-way party, LDP, Ishin, and the Democratic Party for the People, even without cabinet seats, still can push policies through the machinery. It's not firm because there is no cabinet seats assigned to that. So I think what's happened over the last week or so is that this trial balloon is have a snap election, reform the cabinet, and move forward towards the close of April with a new administration that includes maybe some cabinet seat for the Democratic Party for the People, or maybe Ishin, if she can kowtow them into accepting that. And also maybe Komeito. Komeito was very friendly with the LDP for 26 years. It feels unnatural for them to be out of that coalition. They've been in a coalition for 26 years. That's a long time. So they're worried. Komeito is worried. If there is a snap election, what's going to happen to them? Because in the past, they've had seats that were kind of granted to them by the LDP. We will not run a candidate in those 6 districts, so you basically will win those. We'll tell our voters to vote for your candidate. But in other seats, you will relinquish by not having a candidate run in this seat. So they had this whole planned out, and that's not the way it is now. And if they had an election today, Komeito would lose many seats, and the LDP also, without the Komeito support, would lose many seats, probably 10 or 15, maybe even more. So this dynamic continues. There's only a certain amount of time where this maneuvering can happen because it's a compressed fiscal calendar. April 1st is kind of the deadline, and there's coordination with the U.S. that needs to happen at the same time. So the snap election, I think it's a trial balloon. It's a kind of a hammer to kind of hold people in place or threaten them They're not ready for an election. So if you don't want the election, then you should do something with us that's a little bit more amicable to us and to us moving forward. So I think the key issue here for the prime minister is secure some form of stability that we didn't have under Mr. Kishida or Mr. Ishiba, but also to cobble these teams together so that going forward, we're not constantly thinking about a snap election to beat people into submission. So the domestic pressure and the cost of living, the credibility, rice has continued to go up higher. They have a new, very sharp minister of agriculture. He was a bureaucrat in the agriculture ministry before. He is very sharp. He knows his business. Previously, that was Mr. Koizumi, you might remember. He did a pretty good job, I think. He brought the prices down. He opened up more stockpiles. Older rice was being pushed into the market. It did help a little bit, but rice is a perennial problem. Japan is self-sufficient in rice. It produces enough rice for its own consumption. It does import rice, so it should have enough, but the price of it is one of the issues that the Japanese government deals with constantly, and that is an issue right now. It goes in step with the inflation. So inflation continues to impact all households, and it's people in the lower half. So Japan is not it's kind of a homogenous society in terms of there aren't a lot of millionaires and there aren't a lot of poor people, but there are a lot of people in that mid range. But a lot of the people who are kind of economically challenged, they really rely on what's going on with subsidies, with the price of rice, with how much they're paying for their subscriptions, and particularly for energy. So the Japanese government needs to constantly supplement that with subsidies. So the government control narrative, if the LDP wants to push on that, it needs to have coalition partners that support it as well. And then things can move very rapidly. They can move successfully forward. Japan was at its best when the LDP dominated everything. And that was the 80s and the 70s and the 80s. It caused a lot of concern because everything was managed and controlled by the LDP and by the ministries. And people couldn't, foreign companies, foreign competitors couldn't really get a good angle at cracking the Japanese market, selling their own goods. It's changed drastically since then. A lot of companies are doing their business, making a lot of money from the products that they're selling, the services that they're selling to Japan. But Japan wants to get back on track so that this erosion on the yen closed out at 157.8 on Friday, and it just seems that it's stuck in that zone. The temptation to for it to go higher, the natural structure of the currency is for it to go higher. So the Japanese government is pushing that down the Bank of Japan with the threat of maybe supplementing it by purchasing the yen. For the last couple of weeks, it's been somewhat stable, floating around the 156, 157 zone, but it is still structurally weak, the yen. And the rate differentials between the yen and the United States dollar, import dependence of Japan. Japan is not food self-sufficient. It needs to import its food to feed its people. I think it's probably around 65% self-sufficient in food. So that means 30% of the caloric intake needs to be imported. And certainly energy needs are, Japan is not by any means self-sufficient. And that's the reason why this nuclear hiatus is really so painful. And so the fiscal expectations of the country now, the writers, the newspaper writers, the people who are following the prime minister are always very carefully listening to what is being said and what's going on within the prime minister's residence and within the cabinet. And there's this push to, as I said earlier, for the LDP under Ms. Takaichi to coalesce things so that when the diet starts, we can deal with those issues rather than deal with the infighting. So many people who are foreign observers of Japan are impatient with Japan, saying, all they do is they fight about politics, who's on top, who has more power. They don't care about the yen. They don't care about, these other things. But I think it's you've got to put the horse first, and then the cart comes after it. And I think that's what the fight is going on right now. So people who are currently living in Japan, voters, their income, the way they spend their money is dominated not exclusively in Japanese yen. Many of the products that they eat or that they use or that they purchase are denominated further up the chain in dollars, and then it's translated into yen. So that's one of the reasons why the inflation is so persistent, is because Japan is not self-sufficient. This issue with Venezuela and Venezuela oil, and perhaps some of that is going to impact the economy here, it's not quite accurate, because Venezuela oil, Japan doesn't import any not of any substance Venezuelan oil. So currently we have the LDP, Ishin, the Democratic Party for the People, and Komeito in this kind of like spiders dealing with each other. They don't trust each other, but they need each other to cooperate. And I think this is where a lot of deals are made. And we've only got 11 days before the diet starts. So the prime minister is heavy on that. Ishin's position, if you want to know, is, it still wants the seat reduction. You promised you were going to do it, and you didn't do it in the last session. So you have to do it this session. And we want Osaka to be the secondary capital. You promised that, and you didn't make any progress on it. So we need to do that in this diet session. Their leverage has been somewhat weakened because the LDP was able to get away with it. They promised the performance. They didn't perform on the promise, but they're still kind of talking with each other. And I think for Ishin, they're wondering, should we stick with these guys? They didn't treat us with due respect. They promised us, but they didn't perform. And we understand that there are reasons why that. The prime minister has explained it to us. And the prime minister has also said, well, if you come in a little bit closer so that we can depend on you, maybe even join the government, have a cabinet seat, then maybe things will be a little bit different. And they don't want to do that because they want their party to be a national party at some point in time. It's mostly a regional, localized party around the Kansai. But they have their own strategy in that. The Democratic Party for the People, on the other hand, they're just coming off a big win in raising the salary of the taxable salary. That really boosted them and made Mr. Tamaki a little bit more aggressive about joining the LDP. So there's a lot of talk about the Democratic Party for the People joining the LDP in some sort of an alliance. And if you've been watching the show, you know that Mr. Tamaki he's a real flashy, a very boisterous kind of proponent, and he plays real hardball with the LDP, and it's rather public. But if he could be now a confidence and supply partner for the LDP, he could be a potential coalition member or an issue-by-issue broker. But I think those three are pretty much defined. The key issue here is, Komeito. What is Komeito going to do? It formally exited the coalition. It still votes pragmatically on issues of importance to it. So, for example, the supplemental budget. But it wants to avoid being blamed for instability should the government kind of falter. It doesn't want people to say, well, the LDP was trying to push forward these revisions, but they failed. And if Komeito had supported them, the reason why this issue failed, it's because Komeito didn't support. They want to avoid that sort of thing. And they don't want to burn bridges with the LDP. It doesn't quite seem that they want to return to the fold, but I think we need to keep that as an option. We need to look at that. The snap election, I think it's high risk. It would be very disruptive. I think a reshuffle perhaps is more feasible rather than a snap election. And as I said earlier, I think the snap election trial balloon is just a threat. The prime minister can do that, but I think it's just to kind of bring those other parties, closer together. It's a kind of a gridlock avoidance strategy. Dissolution would require the Constitutional Democratic Party and maybe Ishin or maybe the Democratic Party for the People joining in a no confidence motion, that looks really unlikely. Moving on, I'd like to talk about national security and economic pressure. They did a poll about the self-defense forces just 2 weeks ago. The results were published last week. Apparently, 93% of the people now view the self-defense forces in a popular vein. This is important because in the past, they were somewhat diminished. They weren't highly respected. They never, over the last 15, 20 years, have met their recruitment numbers. And the support seems to be rising from the population, specifically because of what's going on in Taiwan. I think because Ms. Takaichi's recognition or her statement that should there be a move by China on Taiwan, that would be an existential threat to Japan, that really teed off China. And so a lot of things happened as a consequence of that. But I think the population says, yeah, why not? That sounds reasonable to me. It would be an existential threat. And it's right for the prime minister to say that, and for the Chinese to get pissed off about it. Hey, why don't you go suck your thumb? So that has kind of made, I think, people realize that although Japan relies heavily on the United States for its kind of defensive umbrella, I think the reality is that Japan is moving very quickly to being not just an alliance partner to the United States in the event of a kinetic action in Taiwan, but to be one of the fulcrums. And you can see that moving incrementally forward. So there are three principles that Japan has on defensive and offensive capabilities, on possessing nuclear or storing nuclear weapons on Japanese soil. And these are constantly being under revision. And you now have Mr. Koizumi once again coming up, not as an agriculture minister, he's now Minister of Defense. And he's beginning to really take on a lot of momentum. He was in a demonstration just this last week, and he leaves tomorrow for an extended visit to the United States, where he'll be there for a whole week. This is important because Japan is more and more increasing to participate in weapons development and weapons export. And it's doing it with the like-minded countries, Australia, New Zealand, France, Britain, all of these countries who are in this kind of loose alliance. It's kind of a pre-NATO sort of initiative, but all of these countries are cooperating with Japan to purchase some of their hardware to help Japan, creep up the development ladder on producing, reliable weaponry. And it's not just, what you might think of as guns and bullets. It's sophisticated stuff, and it's a very lucrative, the military industrial complex is very lucrative for those countries that can participate in it. And you can see that Japan is shifting into that direction. It needs some sort of activant to generate enthusiasm in the economy, because the cars are increasingly taking less and less of the weight of driving the economy. And it's become more, as we've talked maybe 2 weeks ago, Japan is generating its wealth not from making things and not from exporting cars and car parts. That is a thing of the past. Other countries are doing that, and Japan also manufactures elsewhere to feed those markets. So they get revenue from that. And this is actually where Japan makes most of its money, is generating revenue from investments made over the last 20 or 30 years. And it's the IP and it's the licensing fees. It's not on making things. So Japan has got to kind of redesign its economy. Export controls and licensing will continue to be heavy parts of this policy initiative, but it's also the weaponization of supply chains. So Japan is really hammering down on the supply chains, where it is getting its inputs for production, and then mimicking that and duplicating that. That's happening not just in Japan, but Japan being a trade-based nation. It's an island nation, so it depends on trade, and that's why it's so nervous about any kind of kinetic action that might happen in its neighborhood that would disrupt that. So there's a lot of friend shoring with the like-minded countries that Japan is doing business with, and also redundancy investment. So Japan is vulnerable on several areas. It's vulnerable on energy imports and on raw materials, but it's strong on advanced components, on precision tooling, and on material science. But getting back to what's going on in the Venezuela situation, because I get asked that question a lot. Most of the Venezuelan oil in the past, before the United States took that action, most of that was going to China and to Asia, but not Asia being including Japan. So Venezuela was under certain sanctions. The United States didn't like the president or the administration there, and had it under sanctions. Mr. Maduro was under indictment for crimes. So the relationship between the United States and Venezuela was not good for the last 10 years or so. But the United States did import some of the oil that was there. Sometimes it's restricted under sanctions, but when the sanctions are lifted as a reward for something, the United States basically imported about 30 or 40% of Venezuelan oil. The other 10 to 15% went to India, and then the remainder went to Asia, which was predominantly China. None of it went to, not a meaningful amount went to Japan. So the impact of Venezuela on Japan is not in oil or in the price of oil. It could be potentially the price of oil. The import of what happened in Venezuela is more what the United States is willing to do and the signal it is willing to send to its adversaries throughout the world. And it's going, this Dunroe Doctrine, the United States, exerting its influence up and down the continental shelf of North America and South America. And for Japan, that kind of leaves it out a little bit, because if the United States is focusing there, it's probably relinquished some of the responsibility for managing what's going on in this region to Japan. The United States and Japan are very close. They've been close ever since the end of the war. And the United States wants, to focus more on what's going on in the United States and delegating to its partners their own responsibilities. So that means that Japan needs to grow its defense base, and this appreciation for the self-defense forces, and this acknowledgement that, yes, Japan needs to be prepared. Should China move aggressively on Taiwan, we don't want that. We have lots of friends in China. We have lots of friends in Taiwan, but hands off of Taiwan. You shouldn't, we should maintain status quo here. And if China moves on that, it's going to be impactful for us, and we're going to prepare for it. So the appreciation for the self-defense forces is a big signal for the Prime Minister, for this development of weapons, this export market for Japan, offensive and defensive capabilities. So there's going to be a lot more going on there. The supplemental budget dedicated a lot of money to that. This 5-year plan that Japan promised to the United States, we're going to increase our defense spending from 1% of GDP to 2% of GDP, has surpassed that. The Prime Minister promised to Donald Trump, we're going to do everything that we promised in 4 years rather than in 5 years. And this meeting by Mr. Koizumi going to the United States to visit with Mr. Hegseth, the Minister of War, for a week, I think is really critically important. The pace of change, the pace of things happening, it is no longer ceremonial. It is structural. Things are moving at a structural pace. It's not that people are going for photo ops and that sort of thing. It's really things are going on underfoot that we really need to pay attention to. The other problem with Japan is that capital and labor inside Japan don't move very well. People who join companies tend to stay there, whether the company is doing well or poorly. Different aspects of the economy might rise up in prominence, but the capital flow and the labor flow is kind of stuck. They've done a couple of investigations and research in that to show that the allocation of capital and labor in this country has declined, and as a result, innovation exists, but its diffusion is slow. In the high-end companies that are making a lot of money, there's a lot of innovation, but when it comes down to the lower end, the diffusion is very slow, and wages lag as a result of that. There are a couple of reasons for that. One of them is, Japan's famous lifelong employment. There is an inertia that is expressed here because when people join a company, they have an expectation that they're going to be there until they retire. Japanese law accommodates that. Japanese labor law says, unless you have a real good reason to fire somebody, you need to keep them. And Japanese people, typically being more risk averse than in other countries, they usually stay the course, even suffering through poor times, because that's just part of the culture. You need to stick with what it is that you made a commitment for. But also on the capital side, bank lending tends to be favorable to long-term clients, to relationships that have already been established. So for newcomers coming in, I mean, if you want to start a company here in Japan, you can start a company. You can register your incon, you can get your tohon, you can get your registration, but getting a banking account sometimes takes almost a year. You have to have introductions, you have to show your wherewithal, you have to show your documents, your business plan. They really run you through the ropes. And that's not the case in other countries. We've talked about South Korea. South Korea is about 1/3 the size population-wise as Japan, yet its personal power performance of individuals is far greater than Japan. And that's because technology is accommodated more rapidly. Capital flows both ways. It is an easy flow of capitalization. And also technology diffuses much more quickly. So the productivity of Korean workers is far higher than the Japanese workers. And this is taken as a kind of a macro evaluation. So you can pull from that a couple of things. The productivity of Japanese workers, they work long hours, but they're not really producing a lot of high value, except in certain situations. So the Japan economy it's kind of a dual economy. It's got the big players who are really cutting the cloth, and they're making inroads, and they're developing technology. And then you've got the others that are kind of many of them are essentially underwater already, but the economy, the culture, the system doesn't allow them to go bankrupt or to crash or to push people out of work. And that's one of the remaining constants of Japan Inc. is that there's no real up-down volatility in the corporate world. But as a consequence of that, it also means that industrial policy and the diffusion of digital doesn't move as rapidly or as effectively as possible. So Japan is stuck in this doldrum. It's not producing equipment and materials that everybody in the world wants anymore. It's a lot of office work, service work. A lot of the economy is based on tourism, that sort of thing. But the real money is being made from the companies that are involved in the really precise mechanizations and building highly advanced AI and semiconductors, that sort of thing. That's why you see so much going on in Hokkaido with Rapidus and in the south with TMCC. Yeah, I think I can't go on much more about that, but the productivity of Japan is really stuck, and I think the prime minister and the cabinet need to pull that together and pass laws so that capital can move more freely and labor can move more freely. But it's like a structural impediment to do that. Coming of Age Day kind of represents that. Coming of Age is one of the 16 holidays. It's tomorrow. What it is, it's legal adulthood was lowered to 18 years old in 2022, just a couple of years ago. It used to be that coming of age was 20 years old. So this holiday tomorrow is for people who have reached 20 years old, not 18. Although the legal adulthood was lowered to 18, 4 years ago, 3 years ago. And it allows people who were originally considered to be minors, people who are over 18, between 18 and 20, they can now sign contracts and then they can vote. What the 20-year-olds do is they can, of course, they can vote and they can sign contracts. That was always the case. But they can also drink and smoke at 20 years old. So there's a lot of festivity, and it in fact, it's kind of a showcase of supporting kimono culture. So it's one of the times of the year where a lot of kimonos are sold, and you watch television, you watch throughout the country the celebrations, and people celebrate. Usually they're municipal celebrations. The high schools all come together. Maybe they go to City Hall to receive their congratulations. Everybody gets dressed up. The guys, kind of act wild because now they can drink, and there's a lot of festivity to that, and it's something that's really ceremonial, and it's a kind of cool part of Japan. But like I was talking about with labor and capital flows, this one also, it's a dynamic. Coming of age is for people that are 20 years old, even though they moved the legal age to 18. So you've got the legal part and you've got the cultural part, and they just haven't quite blended it together. And it's the same thing with what's going on in the economy. Japan is such a interesting and perplexing place because there's so many examples of that where the rules and the law say one thing, but the culture says another thing. And Coming of Age Day is, I think, a really good example of that sort of dynamic that occurs throughout Japanese society. But it impacts several million people who are now becoming adults tomorrow. So if you're in Japan, the news will be replete tomorrow with what's going on in Kishiwada, and the guys kind of acting wild and wearing these greased hair, and the women looking sharp and like newfound kimono, new ways of wearing kimono or fixing it. And so there's a great celebration there, and it's great for the kimono tradition here. It's not a dead piece of art at all. It's vibrant and it's living, and you see kimono all the time if you live here. But it kind of ebbs and flows. So I'd like to wrap it up and go to the Q&A. I apologize for being kind of spotty on some of the issues, but there just is so much going on. We've got another 11 days before the diet opens. And I think you're going to see a lot more structural positioning so that when the diet opens, then things start with a bang. And if they don't, then it is possible that the diet starts and the prime minister calls for a snap election. I see that as a very low possibility, mostly as a tool, as a threat. But you never know. Somebody thought it was a good idea. Logistically, it could happen without terrible disruption. But I think most people, and a lot of people here in the audience too, would say, why don't you get back to work? You've got inflation issues, you've got the currency, you've got trade flows, you've got energy. Why are you still struggling just to promote yourself and to make sure that the LDP has a pole position? It's a waste of time, and it's a disservice to the population. You will suffer as a result of that. And even if the LDP had a snap election and did well, it still has the upper house that it has to deal with, because a snap election doesn't involve the upper house where the LDP is weakest. So let me turn it back over to you, Maya. Go into our Q&A where most of the heat and light is produced.
Okay, thank you, Timothy, for this. I was going to speak while being muted, and I know that you love when I do that.
I love that.
Yes. All right. So thank you very much for the briefing, and we've got comments and questions. I'm going through them in chronological order today, and you already answered some of them and some of the thoughts, of course. So I will skip the ones that you already talked about. We start with the second comment that was posted by Byron. Because yes, you already commented.
Where has Byron been?
Oh, maybe he was taking a holiday last week. So, but we've got him again today. So that's
Okay.
great. Yes, before I go into that one, though, once again, I wanted to say that on February 11th, we are going to have a very special guest. That's Glenn S. Fukushima. He is a senior fellow at the Stanford University, a very prominent figure in the Japan-US relations. We're going to talk about the Japanese economy and, of course, challenges, issues, and solutions. So please put that date on your calendar and you can watch the podcast. It is a
But
Wednesday, yes, at 8
even
o'clock in the
before that, I
morning.
mean, you have this show every Wednesday.
Right,
Glenn's just
yes.
happens to be in a month, right?
Yes, he will be, yes, there in a month, but well, it doesn't happen very often that we've got Glenn
Yeah, that's
on the
true.
show, right? So, yes, I just wanted to make sure that this is announced and I will continue to announce it, so please bear with me. Anyway, so thank you very much for this. And again, we are moving to the Q&A. Let me start with, once again, I repeat myself, apologies for that, with the second question. It's basically, yes, an observation by Byron Johnston. So he says, can you predict what ministry the DPFP, the Democratic Party of the People's Mr. Tamaki, or Mr. Furukawa will demand or get if
Yeah.
they joined the ruling coalition? They would have liked the finance ministry since they were both bureaucrats there decades ago. But they appear to have missed the boat on that one, as Ms. Katayama appears to be solidly positioned in the Ministry of Finance now, with the full support of Prime Minister Takaichi. There appears to be no vacancy in METI too, since Mr. Akazawa is apparently implementing the agreement signed with the US. So, what other ministries might they want to have for their party?
So thanks, Byron, for the question and the observation. So that is a real bare knuckle fight when that issue comes up. Previously, Mr. Tamaki thought that he sealed the deal with the LDP, and he thought maybe as a concession he would become prime minister. So I will bring in my party, the Democratic Party for the People, into the coalition, but I want to be prime minister as a result of that. And I think that was highly considered as a viable possibility only by people in the Democratic Party for the People, not within the LDP. He was necessary, he was essential in closing that gap, but not at that level. But I think he's the kind of person that will fight for a prime role. Giving him or maybe even Ishin, a cabinet seat, it's so hard because you can't give them, the cabinet position for, a minor position like, taking care of the elderly or that sort of thing. Not to diminish the importance of that, but they want the finance ministry. My God, that is bold. That is, that's where all the money flows. Of course, the LDP is not going to relinquish that. But if, they're not going to relinquish the prime minister's position, what might they relinquish? And for the Komeito, they got the position of labor, right? And they held that position the entire time.
Kumaito actually had the Ministry of
No,
Land,
land,
Infrastructure, Transport and
land
Tourism.
and infrastructure, right? Sorry.
Yes, yes, yes.
And the important thing about the portfolio that contains is it generates and it consumes a lot of money. So there's a lot of money that flows through that. And to be the minister in charge of that and being able to direct things, a lot of your constituents who are lucky enough to be making concrete just like their LDP competitor, they now get the contract. So it's very helpful. And that's what happens. That's how politics moves. It's kind of, it's not really illegal. It's just how things work. If your man is in position, then you're going to get some of that sweetness too. You deserve it because of your support over the last 20 or 30 years, he is now in the position and he owes you the favor. So for these parties to come in and have a ministerial position, it's really, really hard. And if you get it once, you probably want it again, because now you can insert people into certain positions and generate a consistent cash flow, not illegally, not a kickback, that sort of thing. But you're more ingrained into the fabric of commerce. So I can't really respond to that. But when you first mentioned the finance ministry, I almost visibly laughed, because that would not be relinquished. That position has been basically managed and controlled by Mr. Aso for decades, right? It's always been Aso. He was finance minister, or somebody from his faction that's been the finance minister. So once you get it, you never want to relinquish it, and that kind of explains why the Aso faction. It's the only faction that exists. It didn't diminish, and Mr. Aso continues to be one of the wealthiest parliamentarians and also one of the most influential. So being Minister for Finance has a lot of throw weight. But similarly with METI, with the digital agency, with all of those other agencies, there are about 21 of them, formal agencies, and then there are sub-agencies within some of the ministries. So it's, yeah, I think that we're there to be, I think this is something that is likely, more likely than snap election, that one of them, maybe the Democratic Party for the People, jump into bed with the LDP. And if they do that, then Ishin is going to be, hey, wait, what about us? We were the first. We kissed you first. What about us? So it's a really a delicate dynamic. I don't think it'll shake out for another week or so. But I think when the diet starts, those coalitions will be solidified, and we'll either know that we're moving towards a potential snap election, which I don't see, or more of a coalition of parties. I would say friends, not quite friends. The LDP wants to be liked by both of them, but those two don't want to be liked by each other. So you've got that dynamic as well. Great question, though.
Yeah, thank you for that. In this regard, I believe that, yes, we can also add the question by Hiroko-san. She says, about snap election, Kobayashi, chairperson of the Policy Research Council, and Tamaki responded by saying, the House of Representatives is a constant battlefield. They avoided making a clear statement. Do you think it is also a strategy? Is it safe to say that Maki and the LDP had already talked about it? Ishin's co-leader Fujita clearly said that they have not had talked about it with the LDP.
We have talked about this before, and we've also promoted it when we're talking about, please join us on Sunday morning, because although we've been in a vacation mode, a lot of things have been happening. That's specifically what I'm talking about. That the Democratic Party for the People has been talking intensely with the LDP about what if we do this? How about that? And can we do it this way and that way? That sort of thing. So they've come in and really jammed Ishin, and Ishin didn't get what it wanted. So it has a reason to be kind of angry and pissed off. But now it sees their arch enemy, the DPP, moving in and kind of filling that vacuum, and they're thinking, it's better for us to be cooperative rather than to be in the opposition. We made some headway, and let's hold the feet to the fire of the LDP, maybe get the 50-seat reduction, maybe get the capital city nomenclature for Osaka. Let's continue to fight that, and if we have to deal with those very flashy guys in the Democratic Party for the People, we'll just hold our nose and try and bore through it until the next election. So one of the questions that always comes up is, a snap election, will this lower house live out the rest of its term for the next 3 years, almost 2.5 years now, 3 years, until their term ends? It's a rare incident when the lower house survives its entire time without an election. Almost always, halfway through, there is an election called. So it's like the observation was, it's rough and tumble in the lower house. It's, it's really a fist fight there. In the upper house, it's not, because they get 6 years. Half of them are elected every 3 years, and it's much more brushed and polished, and they're not worrying about the politics as much as in the lower house.
Right. Okay, thank you for answering this. And we go on with the other questions. So, from Keizawa Sensei, it is being said that a Japanese national intelligence agency may be established. Do you know
Yeah.
which country's intelligence service is being used as a model?
Yeah, sure. Obviously, the CI, the NSA are being considered as the model. That's pretty much stated as fact. They're following that. By the way, not only is Mr. Koizumi in Washington, D.C. From tomorrow for a week, but the Minister of Finance is also, she left today. She's in Washington, D.C. also for a week. They're not talking as a team. They're separate. They're going their separate ways. But there's a lot going on there. You can only surmise what is going on with defense and with finance to spend a week, a critical week too, in the United States. So there's a lot of coalescing going on under Donald Trump and his administration. People are seeing that centrifugal force, and they're either coming close to it or they're distancing themselves from it. But really, if you're reading the tea leaves, what's going on in the United States, you can't ignore it. And every week, almost every day, something new is coming up. So I think what happened in Venezuela is only a precursor of other things to happen. And I think as the United States moves in that direction, it's going to be reliant much more on Japan. And so Japan needs to put on its big boy pants. It needs to really address some of the structural issues that it has. And I think you're seeing a real concerted effort in doing that. Not that they weren't doing it before, but I think a lot of the foreign criticism of Japan is, why can't you get your act together? How come the economy continues to stumble along? You've got the big companies who are continuing to making money. The smaller companies and the population is not doing very well. And the companies that are making money, they don't distribute it in higher wages or bigger dividends. They hold it in
Yeah,
reservation
it's
just in
equity.
case.
Yes, they do. Very much so. But also, I think that it is a little known fact that a lot of companies here, big corporations, they have the fund for natural disasters. And well, some of that money is also part of, or it's put into that fund so that basically, if there is a natural disaster, it helps the company go through it,
Yeah.
right? So it's not, of course, it's money that the companies sit upon, but I can see why the government will want or would want, that money to get into circulation, of course,
Yeah.
to feed the economy and so on. But when we know how the Japanese mindset is, they prepare for disasters and contingencies most of the time. Yeah, it's not really something that is difficult to understand why that money sits in there.
Yeah. I mean,
In
Japan
res-
has been visited by natural disasters throughout its entire existence,
yeah,
volcanoes, earthquakes, tsunami, fire. There are even, fires that are going on right now in force that are just, uncontrolled. The terrain is too difficult to reach. But this happens, with regular frequency here. And yeah, as a result, the Japanese people are a little bit wary of, volatility, of speculation, of
right.
foreigners, of a lot of different things.
Yeah. And continuing from Isao Sensei, in this connection, I believe that enacting an anti-espionage law is also important. It is essential for preventing the leakage of strategic technologies. Japan's politics and mass media will likely change as well once such a law is enacted.
So the
Yes.
interesting point on this one, thanks very much, Kay, is that Japan doesn't have an anti-espionage law. And you scratch your head and you say, what? why don't they? You would think, the number 2 economy in the world, now number 3, number 4, soon to be number 5, but still it's a viable, there's a lot of IP here, there's a lot of secrets that companies are generating. Why isn't there maybe there's not a lot of espionage that's going on, and you laugh at that because that's not the case. There are a lot of adversaries that are doing business in Japan that live here, that have embassies here, and yeah, to not have it is somewhat curious. So I think they're moving in the right direction, but it would take somebody like Ms. Takaichi to launch that. Previous prime ministers were, Mr. Abe was, though. Mr. Abe, I think, and Ms. Takaichi, a protege of him, is carrying along that. But with some of the other prime ministers, it wasn't a priority for them. But I think definitely there will be an anti-espionage law put up in the next Diet session.
Right, okay. And then we continue on the topic with Rossi commenting, anti-espionage and other security updates seem like reasonable or logical preliminary steps that make sense for Japan, rather than, say, the all-in approach to AI adoption as observed by EU leadership. Well, I cannot agree more on this because, yes, we have seen a lot of questions and questionable practices when it comes to the adoption of AI, especially LLM. Those are the large language models. And I want to read also the other comment by Rossi, which is on technology. While there is rapid development, diffusion, and activity, especially with regard to large language models, applications, there continues to be equally vehement criticism of its application due to concerns to public health, digital security, and creation, management, or equity of knowledge. While Japan as a whole may be missing out on opportunities, I can't help but wonder what real public ills are being avoided by playing by the rules of Japan Inc. Yes, I appreciate this nuanced take on this, Rossi, because we often think that going all in on new technologies is the way to go because we don't want to miss any new opportunities, but at the same time, on the way, there are other things that are lost. And I believe, Timothy, when we talked about the service sector and productivity here in Japan, I think that 70% of the Japanese economy now is supported by the service industry, right? And when you yes, it is amazing, but it is just a mature economy, and it's not the only one. I mean, we see similar things in other parts of the world, among G7 as well. And I think that when it comes to mature economy where with such a great percentage of the service sector, it's really difficult to increase productivity. So still, we have to acknowledge once again that the Japanese industries and the government, of course, as an undercurrent, they're moving towards structural changes so that they can once again start producing components and products that offer added value. So, and probably we'll see some improvement in productivity as a whole in general in Japan, but I really doubt that increasing productivity in the service sector is something that we can see done consistently. And again, because when they increase productivity, I mean, we have seen that in family restaurants here in Japan, right? So they increase productivity, they introduce the robots that serve the dishes and then clean after you. But at the end of the day, people in their late 70s and even, their 80s, and we've got an increasing population in that age group, right?
Yeah.
So they cannot, and they always choose restaurants, for example, or places that offer a human-based service, right? So there is always that trade-off here, and it depends. I understand that eventually, the companies will have to choose what to do: increase productivity and lose part of their customers, or or well, still keep, well, those customers in the older age bracket and offer lower productivity? Or, well, we'll see how it plays out, of course. But I think it's a question that we need to consider, of course, and we need a nuanced take on. Okay. And we've got somebody. Okay. Yes. Hiroko-san, once again, she writes about the dynamics between Ishin and the LDP. So she says it seems that Ishin now has been forced to compromise, and it is very concerning as Ishin's vulnerabilities and weaknesses were laid bare.
Yeah.
Yes, indeed. Okay, and then I guess this is Rossi once again says, Maya, your point on how the reality of natural disasters in Japan and its connection to the Japanese culture and psychology of reserve is really important. Thank you for giving the example of how that plays out at the corporate level. You're very welcome. I can talk about this, for days. So, but I digress now. And we've got also a question from Diana. Diana, thank you very much for tuning in here. So Diana asks, could Shintoism as a way of being, not religion, not as a religion, but as a way of being, be marketed to the world? Do you think it could be a valuable and needed product mindset for the world rather than producing weapons? Yes, because Diana and I are always concerned, about weapon production, about the fact that once you start producing weapons, the powers that be, they want to use those weapons, right? And which inevitably leads to war. And we talk a lot about this. But yeah, so Timothy, what do you think about that? The soft power of Japan.
Shintoism is a purely Japanese initiative. It has its roots for thousands of years here. It is a animist religion. God exists everywhere. God exists in mountains, in streams, in various parts of your life. And I don't think it doesn't proselytize. It's not like the Mormons who actually send missionaries throughout the world. It is their mission to be to proselytize, to bring more people into the fold. Catholics used to be like that. They don't do that so much anymore. Shintoism, I can't see that as being something as a model for international excursion. I just don't see that. They don't have that kind of structure, that kind of organization. The head of the Shinto religion is the emperor, and I think because of the end of the war and the restrictions that were placed by the General MacArthur and the Central Command, they kind of wrapped the emperor in his own box. So you can't really break out of that in a way that's going to be influential for a religion like Shintoism, or for the leader like the emperor to go overseas. And I just don't see that. I think it's, if you've lived in Japan, Shintoism is a big part of the culture here, of the architecture that you see. You can't, I mean, every neighborhood has a Shinto shrine or a jinja. So it is a part of that, but I just, I don't see it moving in an international way, even though some of their concepts are very appealing.
Yeah, I imagine that if it is packaged as a product, it's not going to be done by the Japanese. It's going to be done by people who appreciate the philosophy behind it and the lifestyle behind it, the customs and everything, the values there, but not by the Japanese themselves. So maybe it is for good, it is for bad. I don't know. We'll probably need, some ambassadors of this philosophy.
And where would they come from? Right?
Right. Yes.
And Shintoism, I mean, there are very few Japanese who say I'm a Shintoist. Usually I'm a Shintoist on Thursday because that's when my grandmother died. But I'm a Buddhist on this day because that's when somebody's getting married. And
so that's the other way around, Timothy.
The other way around, yeah.
Right.
See, it's confusing, right?
It is indeed.
Yeah, even
Yes.
even among Japanese people, they don't consider themselves as purely in one camp or the other. Japanese are really flexible that way, don't you think, Maya?
Yeah,
In
very
terms of
much so.
religion, in terms of new religions, in terms of
Yeah.
absorbing, the missionaries that came in, there was
Yeah.
no real outcry. There was no real resistance to that. They're very ambidextrous. They consider and weigh, and yeah, if it makes sense, I ascribe to it, but I also ascribe to something else.
Right. Yeah, I think that the Japanese, as a nation, as a people, are very good at adopting the best parts of anything, and those best parts, I say the best parts because those parts fit their mindset and their way of
Yeah.
living, right? And well, and then they just leave the others the
Hmm.
way they are, right? And I believe that this is actually a great, maybe not a philosophy, really, a way of doing things. So,
Yeah.
yes. All right. And oh, Peter Pan, I'm sorry. That's a very philosophical question, and I cannot answer it. I don't think that Timothy can either, but I'll read it anyway. And maybe we can talk about it next time or on a different podcast. It is about how similar is Shintoism to the philosophy of Spinoza. Um, it's sorry, I cannot comment on this right away. Timothy, if you can
I don't know
comment,
what Spinoza is.
that's a philosopher. Okay, okay. Anyway, so Peter Pan, please, you can laugh at us, you can laugh with us as you like. Yes, but we can address this a little well on a different podcast. Please allow us this discretion. Okay, and then with this, okay. We've got also Rossi once again saying on technology, I want to say that innovation scholars like Dr. Gillian Marcel have long pointed out how technology, innovation, and productivity get easily lumped into one presumptuous category, and how the reality of effects of technology are often very different. Yes, I think it is very true indeed, but we don't recognize this in everyday life, right? We need somebody to tell us, to point it
Yeah.
out to us, so that we start paying attention to that. All right, and then I guess this is Rossi once again saying on the dissemination of Shintoism to the international community. Really intriguing response from Timothy. Timothy, yes. Appreciated this. It is appreciated and agreed. Also, I agree with Maya that effort would be an intercultural one for sure, potentially constructive for intercultural dialogue and reviving awareness that Europe and the US do not and will never dominate global culture, but
Yeah.
they might get close if they have their way pushing AI. All right, thank you very much for this. And well, I think that we have gone through the questions and comments today. Thank you so very much for everybody who chimed in, who shared their thoughts. We very much appreciate it once again. We need your help and we are very grateful for it. So, to Hiroko-san and Rossi and Kei-san, thank you so very much for everything that you do and the comments, and also Manabe-san as well. And Rick and Greg. So we're looking forward to having you with us next time again. Remember, there is a movie night coming. It is on the 20th of January. It is a Tuesday, and we'll share more details as we get closer to the date. We'll be happy to see you there. Of course, if you are in Tokyo or if you are in Kanto, and you can come to Tokyo on that day. So, Timothy, a few words before we let
Thank
everybody
you.
go, and you yourself too.
Thank you. So, Maya, we have a tremendous audience, a global audience. It is really so encouraging. If you like what you are participating in, please hit like. If you're on the YouTube platform or on LinkedIn, please just signify that you appreciate what we're doing. And also, I received a couple of comments while we were sitting here that it looks like, Langley, you're drunk or something. Why don't you just stand still? And I've got to tell you, the wind is just tremendous here, and it's pushing this
Yeah.
boat back and forth, and I'm trying to maintain my balance and not get seasick. But the wind is just absolutely howling outside. I don't know what it's like in Tokyo. How is it there?
Oh, it's very windy here too. And Hiroko-san says that she's in Osaka now, and it's very windy there as well.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it seems that Japan in general is under the power of the wind.
Yes. Tomorrow's supposed to be a much nicer day, coming of age day.
Yes.
You're almost there, right? You're almost getting ready to celebrate that one, aren't you, Maya?
I still have a couple of years to go, but almost there,
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah.
Yes, thank you for that. All right. And
Thank you,
again,
Maya.
to
Thank you for
everybody, yes, to everybody, thank you for staying with us. To you, Timothy, a big thank you as well. And please be with us next week again. Have a great Sunday. Tomorrow is going to be a better day. It is a public holiday. And get out, even if you don't have a person who is coming of age tomorrow in your family or a friend, get out and enjoy all the kimonos and
yeah.
yes, everything that comes with the holiday, this celebration. See you next time, and well, thanks again. Bye.
Thanks, Maya. Thanks, everyone.